Hello and welcome to the Bad Movie Beatdown Christmas Special. It's a familiar holiday tale of a prince cursed in the form of a nutcracker and a spell that can only be broken by the love of a young girl. But screw that! It doesn't have enough Nazis in it! There's a reason this version of the Nutcracker is the Untold story. Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker may be the world's most famous ballet, and because of that it's had numerous film adaptations, managing to withstand the likes of Macaulay Culkin and Barbie, so it really says something that this is the most detested of all of them. The Nutcracker in 3D, or The Nutcracker, The Untold Story if you're watching it flat, because that totally makes it a different movie apparently, is a passion project for Russian director Andrei Konchalovsky, whose long and varied career spans over 6 decades. He even had a brief spell in Hollywood with cult hits like Runaway Train and Tango and Cash, although the latter may not be the best example considering he was fired from that film. Apparently, the genesis of the project goes all the way back to the 1960s, where he was hired as part of an attempted co-production between the USSR, the US, and the UK to adapt the ballet for director Anthony Asquith, who died before it came to fruition. Konchalovsky claims this was in 1969, even though Asquith passed a year before, but he probably just got the year wrong. Konchalovsky's interest in adapting the Nutcracker was revived 2 decades later, but it would take another 15 years before it arrived as this film. Konchalovsky felt the ballet story was too simple to work as a movie, especially the plot of the second act that he called a bad story, and that the dance wouldn't translate either, and went back to its source material E.T.A. Hoffman's 1816 story The Nutcracker and the Mouse King for inspiration, although it's so loose an adaptation that neither the ballet or the book are credited in the final film. It was Konchalovsky's idea, for example, to change the Mouse King to a Rat King, because he felt that rats had more villainous connotations, and added the film's most controversial element, their fascist totalitarian regime that apparently related to his own experiences of growing up under Soviet rule. Totally appropriate in a seasonal film aimed at small children. This was no small production either. This was a huge $90 million independent film, one of the most expensive ones ever, with elaborate sets and special effects, and it's telling that the first credit is for Venture-Bank, a bank owned by the Russian government. All this is detailed in an hour-long documentary on the Blu-ray, because for some reason it's always the really bad movies that get the extensive making-ofs that make you feel bad for the misguided effort involved. To be fair, there's no indication of how bad the final product would turn out, except for the actors in interviews saying things like, "This is all very different and unique," which is certainly accurate. Tellingly, that doc finishes with Elle Fanning filming a promo saying she's looking forward to seeing us in Christmas 2008. In reality, it would not be released until 2010, where it only made back $16 million worldwide, and only a mere $195,000 of that came from the US. That's right, not even a million, we're talking low thousands, a pitiful 1% of its overall takings. Despite the fact that it was a UK co-production, it didn't even reach cinemas here, as it went straight to video in 2012, and it currently stands in the top 50 biggest box office flops. It was also a complete critical failure, managing to get a perfect 0% on Rotten Tomatoes and an 18 on Metacritic, which qualifies as overwhelming dislike, which is putting it mildly. Since the release of the film, Konchalovsky appears to have returned to working in Russia, and it's his last English language film to date. So let's see how a dream project can turn to a nightmare and venture into the Nutcracker, not in 3D, because while I do have that version, I have nothing to play it on. But don't worry, most of the reviews said that was pretty bad too. So we begin our tale in Vienna in the 1920s on Christmas Eve, and it's clear from this opening shot where all the money on this went. In fact, with a full orchestra belting out Tchaikovsky in a horse-drawn carriage, you can almost mistake this for being a faithful and there's a dumb pratfall for the kids, never mind. We quickly move to the home of Mary, formerly Marie, played by Elle Fanning, who was soon annoyed when her brother Max, formerly Fritz, played by Aaron Michael Drozin, takes her snow fairy decoration off the tree and starts burning it for absolutely no reason. What an absolute brat! What do you do that for? Is he a budding arsonist? Is he gonna burn down the tree next? On his way to visit is their Uncle Albert, played by Nathan Lane with a German accent, and I know what you're thinking. Is that meant to be Einstein? Yep. Why does their uncle happen to be Einstein? I don't know, it makes about as much sense as him talking to the camera.
Such a beautiful city, don't you see? But for now, I have the strangest feelings that we are being followed. We are not being followed. Now I'm a little disappointed.
Are you talking to us? You're not the narrator, so who are you talking to? And why are you breaking the fourth wall? And for that matter, why are you so disappointed that no one's following you? Because someone clearly is. That's us. I can't stress enough how utterly random that is, or the character of Uncle Albert in general. He's essentially the role of Drosselmeyer, who is there to take care of the children while their mother Louise and father Joseph, played by Yuya Yosuke, Tchaikovsky's real-life spouse, and Richard E. Grant, are going out to a Christmas party which greatly upsets Mary, who wants the family together. You do know they're coming back, right?
Will Dr. Freud be at the festivities?
I certainly hope not.
Oh, I'm sorry, dear, but you missed him. Sigmund Freud was already in the film's opening scene, because apparently if Einstein can be here, so can Freud. It's a shame he doesn't stick around, though, because he'd have a field day with this movie's interpretations. Speaking of that, as the parents leave, badly animated CGI rats pour in the drain beneath the house, including one that clearly has John Turturro's face on it for the nightmare fuel folder. So are the rats real in this version? Because I know they're blurring the line between fantasy and reality, but I'm pretty sure they aren't, which would mean this is another thing that makes no sense. Oh, and before I forget, on a kind of related note, the housekeeper is Frances de la Tour's Frau Eva, who at one point, for no real reason, starts guzzling from a hip flask. Given what she'll be doing later, no wonder she's hitting the hard stuff early. Soon a manor arrives bringing Albert's present for the children, a clockwork doll's house of three figures, Styx, Tinker and Gielgud, that twinkles more than Nutcracker sweet when cranked. And I'll give Albert this, at least he has a German accent in the middle of Austria, which is more than I can say for the English and American accents coming from everyone else. Aside from the fact that he lived there at the time, why would you include a German scientist well known for being Jewish in a Christmas film? It's like having a cameo appearance from the Dalai Lama in an Easter movie. But more importantly, he presents them with the titular Nutcracker, or NC for the cool kids, who Mary instantly claims as her own, and Albert spends less time introducing this, the main character, than he does the doll's house of pointless secondary players. While he's alone, Max cements his reputation as a little bastard by stuffing too many nuts into its jaw at once and breaking it off, as glimpsed by Turturro. Yep, still creepy. When Mary discovers it, she's outraged, but Albert fixes it soon enough before deciding to teach Max a lesson about compassion and relativity through a terrible song.
If you're with someone tall, truly vast, unsurpassed, built to last, they will think you're small. When you meet a petite, short and sweet, they will think you're tall. Up is down, take is give, in is out, whisper, shout, there's no doubt, it's all relative.
Everything's relative, everything's relative.
Right!
Because that's what Tchaikovsky was missing, lyrics! Clearly when he was writing The Sugar Plum Fairy, what he was actually thinking about was a scientific theorem that wouldn't even be coined until a decade after his death. Yes, many of the famous themes from the ballet have had lyrics added to them, and in another example of misguided talent, this wasn't any hack bastardizing these melodies, it's Academy Award-winning lyricist Tim Rice of all people. You'd think he'd know better. On the making of documentary, Rice notes that Tchaikovsky was the best collaborator he's ever had because he got no complaints from him. Yeah, it's a good thing that he's helpless and dead, so he can't defend his work from being defaced.
Why don't you come live with us?
I'm always with you, dear. If I seem far away, just think of me and I'll be close.
That exchange clearly sets up that Albert will be a recurring character in Mary's dream that will come to her aid, even though he only appears in them in one scene. What, did Nathan Lane's check clear early and he got off the set as quickly as possible? She asks him to read the bedtime story about the Nutcracker, but he's vanished just like that, signalling we're in Mary's dream. She goes over to the toy and apologises for her brother, only to be surprised when it starts talking, voiced by Shirley Henderson, aka Moaning Myrtle from the Harry Potter films, and Mary's dumbstruck gawking here is hilarious. You can talk! I'm simultaneously bored and amazed by this! NC instructs her to place him atop the bookcase so he can crash into some pillows, whereupon he turns into a deeply unnerving CGI creation that becomes her size.
You did it. I've been waiting for someone who believed like you. You're really special.
I'm not sure what it is that makes it so vaguely disturbing. I think it's the combination of the uncanny valley from the CGI and the design with its huge dead eyes, and the fact that it's clearly voiced by a woman pretending to be a boy, and it just sounds really weird and haunting. Ugh. And for that matter, why have someone else voice the Nutcracker when you can just use the boy who plays the prince?
I've got a plan. I have to speak to my friends in the doll's house. So, what's the plan?
Oh, it needn't concern you. Girls are no good at military strategy.
Wait, I have to get dressed first.
I don't have time.
How ungrateful men can be.
I always like my charming princes to be casually sexist. Say, how about we make your jaw fall off again? Mary follows NC downstairs into the living room, where she discovers the tree has grown through the roof, and speaking of size, the room gets bigger the further they walk into it. Quite why the audience needed teaching about relativity to grasp that simple concept, I'm not sure. Indeed, it's not just NC, but all the toys that are alive, which is rather unfortunate because the inhabitants of the dollhouse are exceptionally annoying. And in terms of the creepiness factor, Chimpanzee Man Gielgud, played by Peter Elliott and Daniel Peacock and voiced by Alan Cox, and his CGI enhanced expressions is giving NC some serious competition. When they were deciding on what toys to include, why were their choices a drumming Jamaican stereotype and an escapee from the set of Planet of the Apes? Somehow I get the impression that neither of these things were particularly popular in 1920s Vienna. Aside from reintroducing these characters while they're alive, this scene is largely pointless, as NC and Mary ascend a carriage up the tree, which would have far more whimsy about it if it didn't look like a PlayStation 3 cutscene. Oh, and this happens...
Merry Christmas to you!
Merry Christmas!
Okay, so did those dancers that just jumped off that branch all die? Merry Christmas indeed!
Mary, you're very pretty. Why, thank you.
Ew, ew, creepy, creepy, so much creepy! They eventually reach the Snow Fairy, who takes the form of Mary's mother for some reason, wearing the new skirt Mary has fashioned out of what looks like Quality Street wrappers.
Aren't they beautiful?
But I can't fly.
How do you know if you've never tried?
Come on, Mary. Follow us.
The fact that these ghostly dancers are making calls like, come join us, and don't be afraid, really epitomises how the movie manages to completely miss whimsy straight into sinister. That probably isn't helped by the fact they appear to coax her to fall to her death, but they magically take flight of her and she dances with them in what is obviously meant to be a tribute to the ballet, but feels more like they were obligated to put some random dance sequence in this mishmash and presumably show off their 3D effects. And then it just ends and the movie continues along like it never even happened, as if it was totally pointless. As if that wasn't enough of a cultural bitch slap, the fairy starts singing to Waltz of the Flowers, which has been crowbarred into telling Mary how much of a special snowflake she is. This may sound silly, but why isn't the theme she's singing over the Sugar Plum Fairy, which would actually make sense? It's like the filmmakers decided that people only knew the tunes as opposed to their titles, so who cares what they're actually about? We're gonna sing over them anyway! The fairy tells Mary that NC is not actually a toy and has really been cast under a spell by the Rat Queen, and her touch is enough to break the curse on him, turning him back into a boy, the prince, now played by Charlie Rowe. But nope, that song still isn't over yet, so let's stop the plot for more forced dancing, including some inexplicable geisha ornaments, because apparently this tree was decorated with questionable stereotypes. Oh, and they're being watched by bat rats, who wear large cyberpunk jetpacks that means these vermin apparently hail from the planet Zeist.
So, he's alive. We gotta go tell the king. Let's get out of here.
As for the music, it's terrible.
Yeah, you got that right, my ratty friend. These songs are absolutely hideous. They ruin some of the most beautifully composed piece of music ever. Even Mary and the prince lose interest in dancing as they climb to the very top of the tree so they can show her his city was taken over by the rats, who burst out of the ground in huge monolithic towers that opened up to reveal rat troops dressed like Nazi stormtroopers.
The Rat King is frightened of the sun, so he has to burn everything in his smoke factory, including all the children's toys. just to keep that cloud going.
Because hey, nothing says good, clean family Christmas fun like overtly referencing genocide and war atrocities for the kids. And since this is the 1920s, does that mean that Mary is somehow predicting the rise of the Nazis? We move to the prince's smoggy city and the Rat King's headquarters, played by John Turturro as the bastard child of Adolf Hitler and Andy Warhol, in what looks like the lair of a Bond villain, to the point where it even has a shark tank in it. Oh, we'll get to that. There's even a large montage of crying children on the wall, i.e. your sprogs when they're watching this.
Yes. So hard-headed, you humans.
I always wanted a child-friendly version of the Joker's pencil trick. Nothing like a bit of random sadistic violence to really get you into the festive spirit. And naturally, because this is also a god-awful musical, the king snaps his fingers and a band suddenly appears so he can have a wacky song, because this film's gift to us all is grinding tonal shifts. Decide if we're meant to find him funny or scary movie, otherwise you get horrifying things like this.
And the lights go out. The lights go out.
Holy shit! He just brutally murdered his pet shark completely out of nowhere! Is this movie intentionally designed to traumatise children? Who thought a good way of climaxing this song would be casual animal slaughter? Don't worry folks, it appears the shark was an animatronic and it was all staged for this number, I think. Try explaining that one to your teary-eyed kids. But here's something to cheer them up.
Sorry, too long.
Just what Tchaikovsky was always missing, nut shots! I guess someone was taking the Nutcracker a bit literally. The Bat Rats inform their king that the prince is still alive, so he goes to see his mother, the Rat Queen, played by Frances de la Tour as well, because apparently Mary envisions her housekeeper as an evil tyrant? I'm guessing they're going for a Wizard of Oz vibe that confuses things even further.
Come to Mama.
Movie, I have to say that Batman Returns is the wrong kind of Christmas movie to be taking cues from. Also, is Mary doing cutaways and flashbacks in her own dreams? This kind of structure tends to work best from a first-person perspective.
So why don't you just shut down the smoke factory?
That's it. Fantastic.
Maybe some girls are good at military strategy.
It never even occurred to him to turn off the smoke factories. No wonder he got overthrown by a bunch of rats. The rats send their robot dogs, that would be scary if they weren't atrocious CGI, to eat through the tree, and the Queen drinks some rat juice that restores the spell, making the Prince a Nutcracker again as it topples over. And I'm pretty sure they reuse some of the falling effects as she falls to her doom, or out of bed in reality. What is with this movie's obsession with making Elle Fanning fall out of the sky? I don't think she's done anything to deserve that. I think this movie is bad enough. Mary wakes up and races downstairs, where she promptly bumps into her returning parents, who are mortified when they discover the tree has been felled as she retrieves NC. When she tells them about her dream the following morning, her dad doesn't believe her, given how little sense this movie makes, not surprising, and tries to take the doll away, but she rushes up to the attic, where it's not just the Nutcracker suite under threat from Tim Rice, as part of Symphony No. 5 is used for the song My Secret World, which is probably the only passable song in the film. The problem with the songs in this film, aside from everything else that I've mentioned, is they're completely superfluous. A good musical number should push the story forward, whereas the ones here stop the plot dead, which makes them feel even more forced and irritating, which is somewhat odd considering that the Nutcracker is meant to be a showcase for music and dance.
You know, I have the strangest feeling that something is wrong at Mary's house. I'd better check.
Oh, so you don't just randomly break the fourth wall, you're apparently psychic as well. I would love if it cuts to the reverse angle and it showed he was actually speaking to thin air. So Albert pops by, where Joseph says he should no longer visit Mary and take the toys away, as they're worried she lives in a fantasy world, but Albert knows better.
What's in your pockets?
Pockets?
Don't you remember? There was a boy whose pocket contained one special treasure. A precious pebble worth much more than any diamond. But then one day, disaster. The pebble vanished. Whether lost or strayed or stolen, the boy felt that he'd lost everything.
This is just Sing talking, and there is absolutely no reason this should be a song. It feels like it's been randomly inserted to liven up a boring talkie scene, because heaven forbid we go 5 minutes without someone trying to do karaoke to classical music. Yes, young Joseph loved his magic pebble, and Albert convinced him to leave Mary alone with some emotional manipulation.
I'm so glad I didn't leave the house without my lucky pebbles.
Stop talking to me, Uncle Albert! And do you normally carry pebbles in your pockets? Is that how you usually solve arguments with your brother? Oh yeah, you do raise a fair point, but do you remember Mr. Pebble? There, that's it. Yeah, have a good cry. Now we're back in Mary's dreams, and NC is preparing to attack the rats.
Only oh, Max.
Captain Max, do you want to join the fight against the Rat Kingdom?
Yes!
Because we need some real fighters to defeat the Rat King.
There's a real Rat King?
You know, Max seems awfully accepting of the fact there's a giant talking Nutcracker in his room asking him to be part of his army. Not even a moment of, holy crap, what is that terrifying thing in front of me? NC goes ahead downstairs in what appears to be a fully CGI scene, but finds the dollhouse is empty.
What's this?
Damn, the Nutcracker's turned into a ventriloquist dummy! That Rat Queen's powers have no end! What NC noticed is a pen that Mary dropped near the start, so he completely forgot about it, and ends up getting snared and dragged away into the fireplace by the rats. By the time Mary and Max head downstairs, quite a while considering how ridiculously overdressed she is, look at the size of that hat! He's nowhere to be seen until the Rat King reveals himself, with NC, Styx and Tinker captured.
You call that music? You seem to have forgotten that all toys have a breaking point, and you've reached yours! Catch!
Holy shit, he just decapitated him and kicked around his lifeless plastic head like it was a football! I know it's meant to be comical, but it's really disturbing, especially since the toy's been humanised and it happens completely out of nowhere. Oh, don't fret, Styx is fine, so let's go pretending like that never happened. The movie certainly does, as the king starts jamming NC's mouth with nuts to try and break his jaw off again. This is basically a torture scene, isn't it?
I'm not afraid of you.
Or... Ah!
Jesus Christ! Was born on this day.
Wow! Can you do that again, please?
No, shut up, kid. Never make him do that again. The king takes the toys away to exterminate, destroy in the smoke factory, and Max wants to come with the king as he has a motorbike because he's obsessed with those. Yeah, because I totally want to hang out with this creep. Mary finds Gielgud fallen on the ground. Why didn't they capture him like the rest of the toys? Oh right, because the plot says so. It turns out the mirror in the attic is a convenient portal that leads into the rat world, passing through into a reflected version of Mary's home, where they quickly have to evade a rat soldier who spots them. Okay, if Gielgud punched through the mirror, surely his hand would phase through the glass as opposed to shattering it? We literally just established this in the last scene! Good thing he didn't destroy the portal when he did that. It's about here where any resemblance to the Nutcracker completely falls apart, as the rat world is basically Nazi Germany with more rodent puns, right down to SS-style propaganda posters and flyers.
What is this?
The Rat King wants to turn everyone rat.
Oh good! Nothing like an allusion to the Aryan race and a play on the word extermination. And how exactly does the king plan to turn people into rats anyway? If you're going to allude to things as dark as this in a kid's film, at least have them make sense. Then Uncle Albert shows up in the form of a homeless man playing an accordion to offer some helpful advice.
Could you tell us the way to the Rat King smoke factory?
Follow the toys.
Yep, that's what that scene earlier added up to. He basically tells them, "Got to us the extremely large and obvious smokestacks, you idiots," and that's it. Thanks for being useful, Albert! Oh, and in case it's being too subtle, we see families being lined up towards the palace, like the Jews being escorted into the death cams. Oh, don't worry, they're just being forced to throw their toys into a pile so it can be set alight, like the Nazis' infamous book burnings, as the noises of crying children litters the soundtrack. How did no one on this movie realise this is unbelievably inappropriate? I have a hard time believing that no one walked onto the set while they were filming this scene and went, "Oh my god, we've gone too far. Maybe we should turn down the Nazism by about, say, 90%. Meanwhile, NC, Tinker and Sticks manage to escape from their cage and the motorcycles and start running around the underground tunnels looking for an escape. Jump scare in a children's film! Good luck sleeping tonight, kiddies! As the rat dog chases them, NC orders Tinker and Sticks to separate, but takes so long that he wastes a good head start on it, managing to get trapped by his hat trying to jump over a large drop. Spoiler alert, he dies! Yeah, it happens off screen, but that rat dog killed him. Nice to see a reassuring outcome for the youngsters, huh? But just in case you thought all this Holocaust imagery was too heavy, how about we let John Turturro have another wacky song about his tyrannical rule, even stopping to run over to the crowd and start taking photos of children's crying faces. This is getting sadistic now! The king invites Max to help destroy the toys, but he cries and refuses, so the king takes him prisoner instead. They seem to have given up adapting the Nutcracker and instead going for the Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, as Max is basically Edmund, and given the film version of that came out roughly around the same time, that's probably not a coincidence. Mary follows the toys and dives down into the hole they're being dumped, leading her inside the smoke factory, basically a labour camp powering a giant toy-burning furnace. Good grief, this is almost beyond repulsive now. She soon discovers Tinker and Sticks hiding in a toy pile as NC's lifeless wooden body is dragged up to be incinerated. Oh, and in case you hadn't noticed, NC's leg has been ripped off, which has some rather horrifying implications considering that's meant to be a small boy. Using the toys to do another distraction with What Else, a terrible musical number, Mary climbs up and retrieves NC before he's destroyed and puts him back together, but she can't shake him back to life.
I can't wake him. Please help me.
The last time their power overwhelmed me. It has to be you.
What do I have to do?
I don't know.
I like how the people who show up to help Mary either point out the obvious or offer no assistance whatsoever. Of course, this is a textbook Disney death, and as you might have guessed, Mary's love and her tears not only bring him back to life, but also breaks the spell for good. And when the workers below see their princess alive, begin to revolt. Although given how quickly they seize control, you wonder why they waited this long to easily overpower the rats. It's a good thing that flaming torch didn't set that pile of toys alight. That would have been unfortunate. The prince leads the workers down the sewers, but unfortunately the Rat King is riding down there with his men on their bikes, wasting perfectly good ammunition for no reason.
I'm taking a scenic route!
I just realised that we're kind of stupid riding motorcycles when most of us clearly have jetpacks on our backs. As the rats attack the workers in the factory, the prince puts Mary in a lift for safety, only for it to get shot down, and the king proceeds to chew through it and terrorise her.
I hope you're saving the last dance for me.
Get it? 'Cause it's based on a ballet! Otherwise this line wouldn't make any sense. The prince makes the rats flee because of a high-frequency alarm, but they take Mary, despite the prince and Gielgud briefly grabbing a bike to give chase before they lamely wipe out. The Rat Queen wants to flee, but her son refused. However, Max offers to help her start the helicopter, because who better better to trust than your own hostage. Oh, never mind, here comes the Rat King and Mary anyway to start it up, and it turns out to have bird-like talons on it. I think the claws are meant to look like an eagle's, but they just make the helicopter look like a flying chicken. Of course, this is purely so it can attack Gilgud and the prince as they try to rescue Mary, but end up on top of the wrong tower. Oh look, they're not dead, they've simply grabbed onto the bottom of the helicopter. A struggle ensues in the back, and surprisingly no one ends up being electrocuted from the 2 live wire cables the Queen is holding to power it, as it crashes into the toy pile in the square. The Rat King and Queen both turn back into their rodent forms and escape, meaning that the people have effectively reclaimed their freedom, and we finally get another colour other than grey. As they sing again triumphantly, like they're the cast of Bloody Les Mis, the Snow Fairy shuttles off Mary out of her own dream.
You have to go. I'll never be able to repay you. We'll meet again. I promise. Goodbye, Miss Mary. We're gonna miss you.
Bye, Mary. Remember us in a couple of years when something called the Nazis rise to power, which is going to be super awkward because your uncle is Jewish.
Wake up.
Were you dreaming, dear?
So beautiful.
I really want to hear all about it.
But it wasn't a dream, it was a place. And you were there, and you were there, and for some reason you weren't there, Richard E. Grant. Albert shows up to meet Mary and introduce her to his neighbour, one Nicholas Charles, a boy who looks exactly like the prince, but prefers to be called NC. What a coincidence! As they skate together under Vienna's giant tree, we thankfully close. The Nutcracker in 3D is such a horrendously misguided calamity that you can't imagine how anyone thought this turkey was a good idea. The Nutcracker in 3D is about as festive as watching your Christmas tree go up in flames. Although you have to admire its sheer scale and ambition, when it's committed to a vision as bleak and ugly as this one, it's hard to compliment them for it. The fact the enemy rodents are essentially Nazis is unbelievably distasteful in what is supposed to be a light festive fantasy, deliberately evoking imagery of genocide and war that is frankly rather offensive. Tonally, the film is all over the place, including a hammy John Turturro in a part that makes standing beneath the enemy's scrotum look dignified. And while fairy tales can be scary, the heavy tone, especially in the second half, will simply depress children. Poor Elle Fanning is clearly trying her hardest, and she's easily the best thing in the movie, and its failings are not her fault, while Nathan Lane's Einstein is just baffling. Mostly though, you get the impression that Tchaikovsky doesn't really get or understand the Nutcracker or its appeal, considering the huge amount of changes he makes to the material, let alone the fact that he has those woeful songs set to Tchaikovsky's melodies, with Tim Rice's embarrassingly corny lyrics that have nothing to do with the themes themselves. If you want to experience the Nutcracker, stick with the ballet and avoid this bizarre mess that's just plain nuts. Until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, beating down bad movies everywhere and wishing you a happy holidays. Take care, everyone.